A waitress answered a call in Chinese in front of a millionaire. The next day, she was fired. Asterisk, asterisk. What if one phone call could unravel a secret so explosive, it would destroy lives and topple empires? She shouldn't have done this. A humble waitress in a luxury restaurant answered a call in Chinese in front of a millionaire. For her, it was just another conversation. But for him, it was a devastating secret that should never have come to light. The next day, something unthinkable happened. Unthinkable. The clatter of silverware against fine china filled the elegant dining room of Golden Table, Manhattan's newest five-star restaurant. Zoe Sullivan maneuvered between tables with practiced grace, her black uniform blending into the background exactly as management intended. The wealthy patrons barely glanced at her as she refilled water glasses and replaced napkins. Her existence acknowledged only when needed. Another bottle of the Chateau Margaux for table 12, she whispered to André, the sommelier, as she passed the bar. And Mr. Henderson at table 7 says his steak is overcooked. André rolled his eyes. That man would send back a steak in heaven. Zoe managed a tired smile. Days that began at 5 a.m. caring for her mother before an evening shift left little energy for banter. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. The hospital again. She'd have to check it soon. But what happens when a single name walks through the door, threatening to unravel Zoe's entire world? The restaurant door swung open, and the manager's posture immediately stiffened. Lucas Sullivan, he hissed to the staff. Table 1. Everything perfect. Zoe froze momentarily at the name. Lucas Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan Industries. The same Sullivan that formed half of her own surname. Pure coincidence, she told herself for the 100th time. Sullivan was a common enough name. She watched as the maitre d' escorted him and his party to the prime table overlooking Central Park. Even without knowing who he was, anyone could tell he commanded power. Tall, with sharp features softened only by piercing blue eyes. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about rent payments or medical bills. A woman clung to his arm, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. Victoria Blackwood, Zoe remembered from the society pages, daughter of Sullivan Industries' biggest investor and Lucas's fiancé. Behind them followed a man with a serious expression, clutching a leather portfolio. Zoe was assigned to their section. Unfortunately, wealthy businessmen were the worst tippers, especially when dining with beautiful women they wanted to impress with their importance. Good evening, she said, approaching with menus. Welcome to Golden Table. May I start you with something to drink? Lucas Sullivan barely glanced up, his attention on his companion. The 2005 Krug, George. The serious man nodded. Excellent choice. Victoria Blackwood's eyes flickered over Zoe with practiced dismissal. And sparkling water, room temperature. Zoe nodded and retreated, feeling the familiar sting of invisibility. By the time she returned with their champagne, they were deep in conversation. The lean long deal is slipping away, the man called George was saying. With Chen in the hospital, Lucas raised a hand, stopping him as Zoe approached with the champagne. She served them silently, years of training allowing her to pour without dripping a single drop as she set down Victoria's sparkling water. Her phone vibrated again, longer this time. 3 buzzes. Emergency. Excuse me, Zoe said, steps already carrying her toward the kitchen. I'll send someone else to take your order. Wait, Lucas said, his tone making it clear he wasn't accustomed to servers walking away. We haven't ordered yet. I apologize, sir, Zoe said, her hand already reaching for her phone. Family emergency. Before anyone could protest, she slipped into the service corridor and answered. Miss Sullivan. Dr. Patel's voice was tense. Your mother's having an episode. The experimental medication isn't working as expected. We need your consent for a different protocol. Zoe closed her eyes, leaning against the wall. What are the risks? Similar to the current treatment, but potentially more effective for her particular cardiac arrhythmia. A hesitation. Cost is about 30% more. 30% more than what already consumed every penny of her savings. "Do it," she said, the words sticking in her throat. "I'll figure something out. We need you to sign." "I'll be there after my shift," she said. "Please, just start now." She can't just start the treatment. After receiving confirmation, Zoe took a deep breath and returned to the dining room. She'd have to grovel to keep this job now, but it paid better than anywhere else with her partial college education. To her surprise, the Sullivan party was still waiting, Lucas checking his watch with obvious irritation. "I apologize for the delay," she began. His cold stare cut her off. "We've waited long enough. We'll order now." Zoe nodded, pulling out her notepad as she took their complicated orders. Victoria's salad with 6 specific modifications. George's dietary restrictions. Lucas's rare steak. Her phone vibrated again. "I'm sorry," she whispered, glancing at the screen. Not the hospital this time, but a number with a Chinese country code. Her language study partner in Beijing, probably wondering why she'd missed their scheduled practice session. She declined the call, but moments later, it rang again. With an apologetic glance at the increasingly irritated table, she saw the same number. "Emily must have an emergency," she murmured, turning slightly away. "Excuse me one moment." Before Lucas could object, she answered in flawless Mandarin. "Wei, this isn't a good time." The voice on the other end cut her off, rapid-fire Mandarin describing some kind of business crisis. Zoe frowned. "I think you have the wrong number," she replied in the same language. "I'm not involved in any technology licensing negotiations." The caller became more insistent, mentioning contract terms and deadlines. "Look," Zoe said firmly, still in perfect Mandarin. "I don't know who you're trying to reach, but I'm a student who works as a waitress. I don't have access to semiconductor patents or whatever you're talking about." She ended the call, turning back to find all 3 diners staring at her with expressions ranging from surprise to calculation. "I'm so sorry," she said, switching effortlessly back to English. "Wrong number from China. May I repeat your orders to confirm?" Lucas Sullivan was looking at her differently now, really seeing her for the first time. "You speak Mandarin?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," she answered simply. "Not just conversational Mandarin. Business Mandarin. Technical Mandarin." Zoe shifted uncomfortably. "I was a linguistics major before I had to leave school. Chinese languages are my specialty." "Interesting," Lucas said, exchanging glances with George. "Very interesting." The rest of their meal passed normally, though Zoe felt Lucas's eyes following her movements. As they finished dessert, he requested the check and handed her his business card. "Sullivan Industries, my office, 9 a.m. tomorrow," he said. "We have a proposition for you." Zoe stared at the card. "I have another job in the mornings." "Cancel it," he said, standing to leave. "This will be worth your time." After they departed, Zoe clutched the card, mind racing. A job at Sullivan Industries could mean proper health care for her mother, finishing her degree someday. But working for the family whose name she shared by coincidence? The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Raymond Holmes, her mother's specialist doctor with connections to experimental treatments. Her stomach knotted. "Mr. Holmes," she answered quietly. "Zoe," his smooth voice replied. "I understand there's been a change in your mother's treatment today. Perfect timing, actually. I could use your help with something small." She closed her eyes, knowing what was coming. "What do you need?" she asked, already guessing the answer had something to do with the business card burning a hole in her pocket. The Sullivan Industries tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a glass dagger. Zoe stood at its base, clutching her worn leather bag, watching people in tailored suits stream through revolving doors. After a sleepless night at her mother's hospital bedside, she felt woefully underprepared in her only pencil skirt and department store blazer. "This is insane," she muttered, checking her reflection in the mirrored exterior. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her olive complexion washed out by fluorescent hospital lighting. She didn't belong here, but her mother's new treatment protocol cost $12,000 per month. Dr. Holmes had made it clear, no special arrangements without special favors. Squaring her shoulders, Zoe pushed through the revolving door into the marble-floored lobby. "I'm here to see Mr. Sullivan," she told the security desk. Zoe Sullivan. The guard raised an eyebrow at the shared surname, but made the call. Minutes later, she was escorted into an express elevator that shot straight to the 58th floor. George Lawson waited when the doors opened. He looked even more severe in daylight, his thin lips pressed into a perpetual line of disapproval. "Miss Sullivan, follow me." He led her through an open workspace where conversations hushed as they passed. Zoe felt eyes on her back, assessing, wondering. At the end of the corridor stood a glass-walled conference room where Lucas Sullivan stood silhouetted against the city vista. "Our potential interpreter," George announced, gesturing Zoe inside. Lucas turned, his expression unreadable today. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. "Miss Sullivan, thank you for coming." Zoe nodded, clutching her bag tighter. "Your proposition?" A slight smile touched his lips. "Direct." "I appreciate that." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit." Zoe perched on the edge of the seat while Lucas remained standing, hands clasped behind his back in a posture that screamed military background. "I'll be equally direct," he said. "Our head interpreter, Chin, suffered a stroke yesterday morning. He's stable but unable to work. We have a critical negotiation with a Chinese corporation called Linglong next week. Billions are at stake." George interrupted. "Several translation agencies have failed our security clearance. Professional interpreters require weeks of preparation for technical terminology, but you," Lucas continued, "demonstrated remarkable fluency last night with specialized vocabulary." George ran a background check. "You what?" Zoe interjected. "Standard procedure," George said smoothly. "Former linguistics student at University of Chicago. Specialized in Chinese dialects, nearly perfect scores. Left before completing your degree when your mother became ill." Zoe's face burned. "That's private information." "Not when you're considering working for Sullivan Industries," Lucas replied. "We need someone who understands both Mandarin and business terminology. Someone discreet, without ties to our competitors." "What exactly are you offering?" Zoe asked. Lucas sat across from her. $10,000 for 2 weeks' work, $5,000 now, 5 upon successful completion. Zoe's breath caught. $10,000. Almost enough for a month of her mother's treatment. What would I be doing? Accompany me to Beijing next week. Interpret during negotiations. Review documents. Ensure nothing gets lost in translation. He leaned forward. If successful, we could discuss a permanent position. It sounded too good to be true. It probably was. Why me? There must be dozens of qualified interpreters in New York. The Linglong negotiation is extremely confidential. Their CEO insists on minimal personnel. You have no connections to the industry that might create conflicts of interest. Except for Raymond Holmes, but they didn't know that. When would I start? Today. Now, Lucas said. We have a week to prepare you for the technical aspects. Zoe thought of her mother, alone in the hospital. Of Holmes's veiled threats about interruptions to experimental treatments if she didn't cooperate. I need time in the mornings to visit my mother, she said. Something flickered across Lucas's face. Annoyance? Compassion? Accommodable. George will handle your paperwork. Questions? Dozens, but none she could ask. No, welcome aboard, Ms. Sullivan. Victoria Blackwood's corner office at Blackwood Investments overlooked Central Park. She drummed manicured nails on her glass desk, watching her assistant fidget. Tell me again about this interpreter, she said. The assistant consulted her tablet. Zoe Sullivan, age 26, former student at University of Chicago, dropped out 3 years ago when her mother was diagnosed with a rare heart condition, works mornings at Riverside Care Facility and evenings at Golden Table. Sullivan, Victoria repeated. Coincidence? We're looking into family connections, but nothing obvious. Her mother is Sharon Sullivan, former accountant. Victoria frowned. Something nagged at her memory. Where did they live before New York? Chicago. Before that, records are sparse. Keep digging. I want everything. Medical records, bank statements, old yearbooks. May I ask why this waitress warrants such attention? Victoria smiled coldly. Because Lucas has never looked at a serving girl the way he looked at her last night, 3 months before our wedding. I find that concerning. The assistant paled. Of course. I'll have more information by tomorrow. Sooner. After the assistant scurried away, Victoria picked up her phone. Derek, it's Victoria. Have you heard about Lucas's new interpreter? She paused, listening. You have? Interesting. Drinks later. I value your perspective on company matters. Zoe sat in a small office surrounded by Mandarin dictionaries and technical documents. Her head throbbed. 8 hours of drilling semiconductor terminology would exhaust anyone, but she'd started the day at 5 a.m. at her mother's bedside. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unlisted number. Progress report. Holmes. She typed back, hired. Starting preparations today. His response came immediately. Good. Remember our arrangement. Your mother's treatment arrives tomorrow. Requires my personal approval. The threat wasn't subtle. Zoe deleted the conversation and returned to memorizing negotiation phrases. A knock interrupted her. A young man with Sullivan's blue eyes, but softer features stood in the doorway, his smile tentative. You must be our miracle interpreter, he said. I'm Derek Sullivan, the less intimidating brother. Zoe stood, extending her hand. Zoe Sullivan. No relation. At least, not that I know of. Derek's handshake was warm, his gaze curious. Sullivan. Interesting coincidence. Was it her imagination, or did his eyes linger on her face, searching for something? George has you cramming technical jargon, I see, he said, glancing at her materials. Lucas can be intense about preparations. It's fine. I need to be ready. Derek leaned against the doorframe. You know, your name seemed familiar. I was reviewing some old company files recently. George appeared suddenly, his expression stormy. Derek, didn't realize you were in today. Derek straightened, something unspoken passing between the men. Just welcoming our new team member. Don't let me interrupt your preparations. He nodded to Zoe and departed, leaving an odd tension behind. George watched him go, then turned to Zoe. Mr. Sullivan requires your presence in his office. We're strategizing dinner conversation topics. The Chinese place great importance on personal relationships. As she gathered her notes, Zoe wondered about Derek's unfinished sentence. What old company files had her name? And why had George interrupted so abruptly? Outside, rain began streaking the windows, mirroring her internal unease. She was now allied with 3 dangerous men, Lucas Sullivan, who could fire her on a whim, Raymond Holmes, who controlled her mother's treatment, and possibly Derek Sullivan, whose curious recognition suggested complications she couldn't begin to imagine. Her phone buzzed again. Holmes. Need intel on Ling-Long negotiations by Friday. Nothing traceable. The rain intensified, hammering against glass 60 stories above Manhattan, where secrets and power intertwined like strands of a spider's web. And Zoe had just walked straight into the center. The Sullivan Industries archive room smelled of dust and secrets. Located 3 levels below the main lobby, it housed decades of corporate history in rows of filing cabinets and acid-free boxes. Few people ventured here in the digital age, which made it perfect for Zoe's clandestine research. Her security badge shouldn't have granted her access, but she discovered the archives weren't included in the restricted areas list, an oversight she intended to exploit. With Lucas and George occupied in board meetings, she had precisely 45 minutes. Zoe moved through the dimly lit rows, scanning labels. The administrative assistant had mentioned that personnel records from before 2010 hadn't been fully digitized. If there was any connection between her mother and Sullivan Industries, it would be here. Her fingers trailed along cabinet handles until she found it. Accounting Department, 1995 to 2005. Her heart quickened. Sharon Sullivan had worked as an accountant somewhere in New York during that period before relocating to Chicago when Zoe was a child. The timing aligned too perfectly to ignore. The drawer slid open with a metallic groan. Inside, folders were arranged alphabetically. Zoe flipped through them with trembling fingers. Sanderson, Schwartz, Simmons, Sullivan. She pulled the folder, its weight substantial. Inside was a personnel file with a younger version of her mother smiling in the attached photo. Sharon Sullivan, Senior Financial Analyst, 1998 to 2004. "Oh my God," Zoe whispered. Her mother had worked for Sullivan Industries for 6 years and had never once mentioned it. She scanned the employment history. Sharon had been hired under Kenneth Sullivan's leadership, Lucas's father, and had risen quickly through the ranks. Exemplary performance reviews until 2004, when everything changed. The final pages contained newspaper clippings. Sullivan Industries recovers from financial scandal. Former accountant accused of $37 million fraud. Kenneth Sullivan dies of heart attack following company crisis. Zoe's blood turned to ice as she read the accusations. According to these records, Sharon Sullivan had orchestrated a complex embezzlement scheme, then disappeared with millions when discovered. The scandal had allegedly triggered Kenneth Sullivan's fatal heart attack. "This can't be right," Zoe muttered. Her mother, who clipped coupons and worked double shifts to make ends meet, a multi-million-dollar embezzler, the woman who had instilled in Zoe an almost fanatical honesty. A date caught her eye. The alleged theft occurred just weeks before they moved to Chicago and changed their phone number, before her mother started using her maiden name for everything except legal documents. They'd been running. Zoe photographed the documents with shaking hands, then carefully replaced the folder. As she turned to leave, another cabinet caught her attention. Executive Files, K. Sullivan, Confidential. Glancing at her watch, 20 minutes left. She hesitated, then moved toward it. The drawer required a key she didn't have, but years of barely making rent had taught her useful skills. With a paperclip from her pocket, she manipulated the simple lock until it clicked. Inside was a thinner file labeled Operation Clean Slate. She opened it to find financial records, offshore account numbers, and a list of names. Her mother's was among them, alongside Y. Fong, a name Zoe didn't recognize, but that sounded Chinese. Before she could read further, a voice cut through the silence. "Finding anything interesting?" Zoe spun around, heart hammering. Derek Sullivan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I was just researching Chinese business customs," she stammered, trying to slide the folder back without being obvious. Derek stepped closer. "In my father's confidential files?" She froze. Caught. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can." Sharon Sullivan's daughter. The words hung between them like a drawn weapon. Zoe's mind raced through escape scenarios, calculating how quickly she could reach the door. Derek raised his hands. "I'm not here to expose you." "Then why are you here?" He sighed, glancing around the archive room. "Same reason as you, I suspect. Looking for truth in old paper. You knew who I was the moment you met me." Derek nodded. "You have her eyes. And the timing of your appearance seemed significant." "Significant how?" "Lucas preparing to take the company public. The Ling-Long deal, potentially worth billions. And suddenly, a Sullivan with connections to our biggest corporate scandal shows up speaking perfect Mandarin." He shook his head. I don't believe in coincidences that convenient. I didn't know, Zoe said quietly, about any of this. My mother never told me she worked here. Derek studied her, seeming to weigh her sincerity. You had no idea your mother was accused of stealing $37 million and indirectly causing my father's death? No, Zoe whispered. We've always struggled financially. If she had millions, you wouldn't be working as a waitress to pay for her medical treatments, Derek finished. Which means either she hid the money very well, or she didn't take it. Zoe nodded. Derek, what did you find in there? She hesitated, then handed him the folder. Operation Clean Slate. My mother's name is listed alongside someone called Y. Feng. Derek's eyebrows rose as he scanned the contents. These are transfer authorizations to Cayman accounts signed by my father and George Lawson. George, Lucas's right-hand man. George was my father's right-hand man first, Derek explained. He practically raised Lucas after our mother died. When I questioned the accusations against Sharon back then, George was the one who showed me the irrefutable evidence of her guilt. Why would he frame my mother? I don't know, but George has always been obsessively protective of the Sullivan legacy. Derek checked his watch. We need to get out of here. George monitors the archive room access logs weekly. Zoe quickly photographed the remaining documents while Derek returned the folders to their proper places. What will you tell Lucas? She asked as they headed for the exit. Nothing, for now. If I'm right, and our pasts are connected in ways we don't fully understand, revealing your identity could put you in danger. He held the door for her. Why are you really here, Zoe? At Sullivan Industries. She thought of Holmes, of her mother's treatments, of the mounting hospital bills. I needed the job. Just coincidence that you applied right when we needed a Mandarin interpreter? I didn't apply. Lucas recruited me after hearing me speak at the restaurant. Derek's expression darkened. Convenient timing. What are you suggesting? Nothing yet. But be careful around George. He's been jumpy since the Ling-Long negotiations began. Derek hesitated. If you find anything else, or if you're worried, call me, not Lucas. Why are you helping me? Derek's smile was tinged with sadness. Let's just say I've had questions about what happened for 20 years. Maybe you're the catalyst to finally finding answers. They parted ways at the elevator, Zoe returning to her temporary office, mind reeling. Her mother, accused of a massive financial crime. Their sudden move to Chicago. The mysterious Y. Feng connected to offshore accounts. And now she was interpreting for a Chinese corporation dealing with the very family her mother had supposedly betrayed, while secretly feeding information to Raymond Holmes, who controlled her mother's medical care. The web of connections was too intricate to be coincidental. On her desk, she found a finalized itinerary for Beijing. They would leave in 3 days. Attached was a note in Lucas's precise handwriting. Dinner tonight, 8 p.m. We need to discuss approach strategy. Her phone buzzed with a message from Holmes. Need update on deal structure. Don't forget who keeps your mother breathing. Outside her window, storm clouds gathered over Manhattan. Dark and foreboding. Beijing sprawled beneath them, a vast metropolis shrouded in early morning haze. From the window of their 53rd floor hotel suite, Zoe watched the city awaken, an ancient dragon stirring in the dawn. After 16 hours in a private jet, her body clock was thoroughly confused, but her mind remained sharp, vigilant. Impressive, isn't it? Lucas appeared beside her, nursing a cup of black coffee. In the 5 days since discovering her mother's connection to Sullivan Industries, Zoe had maintained a careful, professional distance from him. Harder now, in the intimate confines of the presidential suite's shared living area. It's my first time in China, she admitted. I've only studied the language. Never experienced the culture firsthand. Lucas nodded. The Forbidden City is visible from here on clear days. Perhaps after the negotiations wrap up, we could tour it. That would be. Zoe searched for a non-committal word. Educational. A hint of amusement touched his eyes. You're very guarded, Miss Sullivan. All work, no personal connection. Isn't that more professional? Not with the Chinese, he corrected. Business here is built on relationships, trust. They'll be scrutinizing our interactions, how we communicate with each other. Zoe tensed. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to present a united front, which means you'll need to call me Lucas, smile occasionally, and stop looking like you're calculating escape routes whenever I approach. She flushed, because that's exactly what she'd been doing. I'll work on it, Lucas. His smile transformed his face, softening the sharp angles. Better. Our first meeting is at 11 o'clock. Ling Long executives will join us for lunch, then preliminary discussions this afternoon. Zoe nodded, consulting her tablet. The CEO, Mr. Ling, will only be present for video conferences. Correct? Yes. Apparently, he rarely meets in person until deals are finalized. We'll be working primarily with his deputy, Mr. Zhang. Have you ever seen Mr. Ling even on video? Lucas frowned briefly. He keeps his camera dimly lit and wears dark glasses, citing light sensitivity. George thinks it's a negotiating tactic, maintaining mystery. Zoe made a note. Something about this elusive CEO nagged at her, though she couldn't articulate why. What should I know about Mr. Zhang? Harvard MBA, traditional in business, progressive in technology, respects preparation and punctuality. Lucas hesitated. There's something else you should know. Victoria arrives tomorrow. Zoe's stomach tightened. Your fiancé? Why? Officially, to represent Blackwood Investments' interests in the deal. Unofficially, he sighed. She doesn't trust me in a foreign country with a female interpreter. That's ridiculous. I'm an employee. Victoria has trust issues. Her concern is unnecessary, but we'll need to accommodate her. Zoe turned back to the window, hiding her reaction. Victoria's arrival complicated everything, her information gathering for Holmes, her private investigation into her mother's past, and these unsettling moments of connection with Lucas. I should prepare for the meeting, she said. Lucas checked his watch. Join me for breakfast first. You can practice being less afraid of me. Despite herself, Zoe laughed. I'm not afraid of you. No. His eyes held hers. Then what are you afraid of? Everything about the situation, she thought. Out loud, she said, running out of caffeine before the negotiations start. The Ling Long headquarters occupied a gleaming tower of glass and steel in Beijing's financial district. Inside, ancient Chinese art adorned ultramodern spaces, tradition and innovation in perfect balance. Mr. Zhang greeted them warmly in the marble lobby. Mr. Sullivan, welcome to Ling Long. And this must be your interpreter, Miss Sullivan. Zoe translated Lucas's response, adding the appropriate honorifics in Mandarin. Zhang's eyebrows raised slightly, impressed by her fluency. Your Mandarin is excellent, he commented. Where did you study? University of Chicago, she replied in his language. But I've always had an affinity for Chinese dialects. A natural gift, Zhang nodded appreciatively. Mr. Ling will be pleased. They were escorted to a spacious conference room where lunch awaited, an elaborate spread of regional specialties. As they ate, Zhang kept the conversation light, asking about their flight and accommodations. Zoe translated smoothly, maintaining the delicate cultural balance between business and personal connection. Mr. Ling will join us by video conference after lunch, Zhang explained. He's particularly interested in your semiconductor integration proposal. The screens at the end of the room flickered to life, revealing a dim silhouette. The man wore dark glasses and sat partially in shadow, his features indistinct. Mr. Sullivan, a deeply accented voice greeted them. I trust your journey was comfortable. As Zoe translated, something about the man's posture struck her as familiar. She stared at the screen, trying to place the recognition. Miss Sullivan, Mr. Ling addressed her directly. Your Mandarin pronunciation is excellent. Northern dialect with academic influence. Very precise. Thank you, she responded, unsettled by his scrutiny. Despite the dark glasses, The meeting progressed through technical specifications and market projections. Zoe translated complex technical terms flawlessly, but part of her mind remained fixated on Mr. Ling. Something about him. When the conference ended 2 hours later, Lucas squeezed her shoulder. Excellent work. They're clearly impressed. Mr. Zhang invited them to dinner that evening at an exclusive restaurant. As they departed the building, Zoe noticed a photograph in the lobby. A younger Mr. Ling receiving an award, his face partially visible beneath smaller sunglasses. She froze, pulse quickening. The curve of his jaw, the set of his mouth, they resembled the few photographs she had of her father, who had died in an accident when she was 5. Zoe, Lucas called from the doorway. Everything all right? She tore her gaze away. Yes, just admiring the architecture. Back at the hotel, Zoe's phone buzzed with a message from Holmes. Victoria boarding flight to Beijing. She has information about your mother. Proceed with extraction exactly as planned tomorrow. Zoe's blood ran cold. Victoria had information about her mother? What kind of information? And how was it connected to Holmes? A knock on her door startled her. She quickly deleted the message before opening it. Lucas stood in the hallway, jacket discarded, tie loosened. Can we talk? Something felt off in that meeting. She let him in, maintaining a professional distance. What do you mean? Ling focused too much on you. The questions were pointed, personal. I'm just the interpreter. Exactly, Lucas paced the room, which is why his interest is concerning. Zoe chose her words carefully. Perhaps he was evaluating my competence. Or perhaps there's something else. Lucas stopped pacing, his expression serious. Victoria called before we left New York. She suggested you might have connections to our competitors. Zoe's heart hammered against her ribs. That's absurd. Is it? He moved closer. Your linguistic skills are extraordinary. Your appearance in our orbit, perfectly timed. And there's the curious fact that you share my surname. Sullivan is common enough. Not with your particular background. His gaze was penetrating. Who are you really, Zoe Sullivan? The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken tensions. Zoe weighed her options, partial truth or complete deception. I'm exactly who I appear to be, she said finally. A linguistics student who couldn't afford to finish school. Someone trying to support a sick mother. Nothing more mysterious than that. Lucas studied her face, searching for deception. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, because his expression softened. I believe you, he said quietly. But Victoria won't. Be prepared. He moved toward the door, then hesitated. For what it's worth, I told her she was wrong about you. After he left, Zoe sank onto the bed, trembling. Victoria was bringing information about her mother. Holmes was accelerating his demands. Mr. Ling resembled her dead father. And Lucas was beginning to trust her, just as she was being forced to betray him. She pulled out the only photograph she had of her father, creased and faded from years in her wallet. Yulan Fong, according to her mother, had died in a car accident in New York. His face was partially obscured by the camera angle, but the resemblance to the glimpse she'd caught of Mr. Ling was undeniable. Tomorrow, Victoria would arrive, carrying unknown threats. But tonight, Zoe had a more immediate mission. She needed to get a clearer look at Mr. Ling's face. She picked up her phone, heart pounding, as she dialed Derek Sullivan's number back in New York. The Temple of Heaven can wait, Victoria Blackwood announced, dropping her designer handbag onto the hotel suite's marble counter. I need a shower and real coffee before I pretend to care about ancient architecture. Zoe maintained her professional smile, despite the Arctic chill emanating from Lucas's fiancé. Victoria had arrived at dawn, impeccably dressed despite the 12-hour flight, her diamond engagement ring catching the morning light like a warning beacon. The corporate tour starts at 11 o'clock, Lucas reminded her, checking his watch. That gives you 2 hours. Victoria's gaze flicked dismissively over Zoe. And why exactly is your translator joining us for sightseeing? Cultural context, Lucas replied smoothly. Zoe provides insights on business etiquette that have already proven invaluable. Zoe, Victoria repeated, testing the name like a suspicious food. Tell me, how does a waitress become so fluent in Mandarin? Zoe met her gaze steadily. 6 years of university study and language exchange programs. Yet you didn't complete your degree. Family obligations took precedence. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. How fortunate that Lucas discovered your hidden talent. The undercurrent was clear. Victoria suspected her of something, perhaps everything. Before Zoe could respond, Lucas intervened. We should prepare for today's meetings. Zoe, could you review the technical amendments with me? He gestured toward his suite's adjoining office. Once alone, he sighed. I apologize for Victoria's behavior. No need, Zoe replied, maintaining professional distance. Your fiancé is protective of your interests. My interests? Lucas echoed, something unreadable crossing his face. Yes, I suppose she is. The door opened as Victoria entered, freshly showered and changed into a sleek business ensemble. Don't let me interrupt, she said, though clearly that was her intention. I just need to borrow Lucas for a moment. Zoe nodded and stepped out, but not before hearing Victoria's whispered, I found something about her mother you need to see. The lean-long corporate tour proceeded with glacial politeness. Victoria attached herself to Lucas's arm, leaving Zoe to translate from a careful distance. Mr. Zhang led them through research facilities and manufacturing floors, detailing innovations with evident pride. Mr. Ling has requested a private meeting with Ms. Sullivan this afternoon, Zhang announced as they concluded the tour, to discuss cultural nuances of the contract language. Lucas frowned. I should be present for any contract discussions. Mr. Ling specifically requested Ms. Sullivan alone, Zhang insisted. A brief cultural consultation only. Victoria's nails dug visibly into Lucas's arm. Zoe could practically hear her suspicious thoughts. It's considered disrespectful to decline such a request, Zoe explained quietly. I can record the meeting if that would ease concerns. That won't be necessary, Lucas replied, though his expression remained troubled. We trust your discretion. Victoria's smile suggested otherwise. The executive meditation garden, where Zoe was instructed to meet Mr. Ling, was an oasis of tranquility within the corporate complex. Ancient trees surrounded a small pavilion beside a koi pond, the city's cacophony reduced to a distant hum. Zoe checked her phone one last time before entering. Derek had texted back, after their late-night call, be careful. If your suspicions are correct, nothing is coincidence. Trust no one until you know the full story. She tucked the phone away and stepped into the garden. A solitary figure sat in the pavilion, back turned, dark glasses in hand as he gazed at the water. Mr. Ling, she called softly in Mandarin. You requested my presence. He didn't turn immediately. The first time I held you, he said in English, his accent much lighter than in meetings, you were 3 days old. Your mother was exhausted from labor, sleeping in the hospital bed. I sat by the window, just like this, and promised I would protect you both forever. Zoe froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did you say? He turned, removing his dark glasses completely. The face that regarded her was older, lined with years of worry, but unmistakably the same as the faded photograph in her wallet. Hello, Zoe, he said softly. I've waited 20 years to speak those words to you again. Her legs nearly gave out. You can't be him. My father died. There was a funeral. There was a closed casket and a grieving widow, he corrected gently. But no body. Zoe's mind reeled. If you're really Yulan Fong, my father, then why? Why fake your death? Why abandon us? Pain crossed his features. To keep you both alive. He gestured for her to sit beside him on the stone bench. When she remained standing, he sighed. I understand your shock and anger. I've rehearsed this conversation countless times, never finding adequate words. He reached into his jacket, withdrawing an old photograph, Zoe as a toddler, held in his arms, her mother laughing beside them. I kept this with me every day of our separation. The familiarity of the image, one she'd seen in her mother's keepsake box, shook her. This wasn't information a stranger could possess. Explain, she demanded, finally sitting, maintaining distance. Yulan nodded. I was an independent financial investigator specializing in international money laundering 20 years ago. I was contracted by a regulatory agency to examine suspicious transactions at several multinational corporations, including Sullivan Industries. Zoe whispered yes. What I discovered was a massive operation moving illegally obtained funds through shell companies into offshore accounts. When I prepared to present my findings, I received a warning. Photographs of you and your mother, taken through our apartment windows. The message was clear. Stay silent or lose my family. Zoe's throat tightened. So you disappeared instead. I staged my death to sever connections to you both, then fled to China, my ancestral home, but a place I'd never lived. I created a new identity, built legitimate businesses, all while gathering evidence against those who threatened us. His eyes, so like her own, held decades of pain. I've watched you from afar. Your graduation from high school, your university acceptance. You've been spying on us. Anger flared through her shock. Protecting you, he corrected. Anonymous tuition payments, medical specialists for your mother. Why do you think Sharon received experimental treatments despite your financial situation? Zoe stood abruptly. Raymond Holmes. The treatments. That's your doing. Yulan frowned. Holmes? No. I arranged specialists through university research programs. I don't know any Holmes. Cold realization washed over her. Holmes had leveraged treatments her father had arranged, presenting them as his own benevolence, using them to manipulate her. If you wanted to protect us, why bring me to Beijing now? She demanded. Why risk exposure after 20 years? Because Kenneth Sullivan is dead, but his corruption lives on through his empire. When I learned Lucas Sullivan needed a Mandarin interpreter, I saw an opportunity to place someone I trusted inside his organization. Yulan's expression softened. I never anticipated it would be you. When your name appeared in the delegation list, I nearly canceled everything. But you didn't. No, because Sullivan Industries is preparing to go public, with the Ling-Long partnership as its centerpiece. The same corrupt channels Kenneth established are being reactivated to launder money through this deal. His voice hardened. I've spent 20 years building this company, creating a legitimate enterprise with enough power to finally expose the truth without endangering my family. Zoe processed this information slowly. You're saying Lucas is continuing his father's illegal operations? Someone at Sullivan Industries certainly is. Whether Lucas knows is unclear. What about my mother? She worked in their accounting department before we moved to Chicago. Yulan's expression darkened. Sharon discovered irregularities in the books. When she brought them to Kenneth's attention, she became a liability. They framed her for embezzlement, forced her to flee, and used her as a scapegoat when investigations came too close to the truth. She never told me any of this. To protect you. Knowledge is dangerous. He reached for her hand, which she reluctantly allowed. Zoe, I never stopped being your father. Every decision, every sacrifice, was for you and your mother. Tears blurred her vision. You could have found another way. Do you have any idea what we've been through? Mom working multiple jobs, getting sicker each year, me dropping out of school to care for her. I'm sorry, his voice broke. But we're running out of time. Victoria Blackwood's arrival has accelerated events. She's been investigating your background. How do you know that? Because I've been investigating her. Victoria is Kenneth Sullivan's goddaughter. Her father, Richard Blackwood, was his partner in more than business. Zoe's mind raced, connecting fragments. The upcoming merger isn't just about business, is it? It's personal for you. It's about justice, Yulan confirmed. And now that you're here, it's about family too. Help me finish what I started 20 years ago. Help me clear your mother's name and expose the truth. By betraying Lucas, Zoe stated flatly. Yulan's expression was unreadable. By revealing the corruption within his company. Corruption he may well be perpetuating himself. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated with a message from Lucas. Meeting in 20 minutes. Where are you? Followed immediately by one from Holmes. Execute phase 1 tonight, or your mother faces consequences. Zoe looked up at her father, a ghost resurrected, a stranger with familiar eyes, a man who had sacrificed everything yet nothing at all. I need time to think, she said finally. Yulan nodded, replacing his dark glasses. Tomorrow at the temple tour. Tell no one about this conversation. As she turned to leave, he added softly, your mother named you Zoe because it means life in Greek. You were our second chance. Perhaps this is our third. Rain pounded against the windows of Derek Sullivan's Manhattan apartment as he spread documents across his dining table. 3 a.m. and sleep remained elusive. He'd been digging through Sullivan Industries' financial archives for days, searching for patterns only half remembered from his teenage years. His phone buzzed with a text from halfway across the world. It's him. We need to talk. Secure line. Zoe. Derek quickly established an encrypted connection. You found your father, he said when her face appeared on screen. How did you know? The name in the files. Why, Fong. When you mentioned your father was Chinese, he shrugged. What did he tell you? Zoe's expression was haunted. That he faked his death to protect us from threats after discovering financial irregularities at Sullivan Industries. He claims my mother was framed for embezzlement by your father and his partners. Derek ran a hand through his disheveled hair. That aligns with what I found. He angled his camera toward the documents. These are internal audits from 2004, just before the scandal broke. Look at these transfers. Systematic, precise, not the chaotic desperation the official report described. My father said someone at Sullivan Industries is still using the same channels for money laundering through the Ling Long deal. George, Derek said immediately. He's been making unusual moves. Private calls, encrypted files. I've been tracking his digital footprint. Why would he continue after all these years? Power, money, or... Derek hesitated. Protection. From what? From whoever was behind the original operation. Derek shuffled through papers. Your father wasn't the only one investigating back then. Federal agencies had opened preliminary inquiries. Zoe's eyes widened. Victoria told Lucas she found information about my mother. Victoria's father was thick as thieves with mine. If there's dirty money, Blackwood Investments has fingers in it. Derek lowered his voice. What's your plan? I don't have one. I'm being pulled in 3 directions. Holmes is threatening my mother if I don't help sabotage the deal. My father wants me to expose Sullivan Industries' corruption. And Lucas, she trailed off. Lucas trusts you, Derek finished. Despite Victoria's suspicions. Yes, Derek studied her troubled expression. There's more to it than trust. Zoe didn't deny it. What about your mother, Sharon Sullivan? Is she safe? For now. The hospital has strict visitor protocols. Stay close to her if things escalate. They already have. I need to know exactly what documents Victoria brought to Beijing. I'll try to find out. Be careful, Derek. If George suspects you're investigating, same to you. Watch your back with Victoria. And Zoe? Whatever my father did, Lucas isn't him. The connection ended, leaving Derek alone with his suspicions and a growing sense of dread. Victoria Blackwood arranged her documents precisely on the hotel's suite's coffee table, files color-coded and annotated with her elegant handwriting. George Lawson sat opposite, his expression grim as he reviewed her findings. Sharon Sullivan's daughter, he muttered, working as our interpreter. It's too calculated to be coincidence. When I saw her name on the delegation list, I knew something was wrong. Victoria tapped a personnel file. The timing is suspicious, appearing just as the Ling Long deal develops and Lucas prepares to take the company public. Have you shown Lucas these records? Not everything. Just enough to raise concerns without revealing our particular interests. Victoria's smile was cold. He's developing feelings for her. It clouds his judgment. George snorted. Lucas doesn't do feelings. He does obligations and strategies. Men can surprise you when the right woman appears. She selected another document. What concerns me is this connection between Ling Long and a shell corporation that received funds during the original scandal. George's eyes narrowed. You've been investigating my financial arrangements. My father taught me to verify all connections before major investments. Victoria's tone remained pleasant, though her eyes hardened. Imagine my surprise when I discovered familiar patterns. Your father understood business necessities. Channels once established are valuable. Indeed. But Lucas doesn't share that understanding. If these connections were exposed, they won't be, George stated flatly. I've managed these matters for 20 years without incident. Until Sharon Sullivan's daughter appeared, working for our chief competitor while translating our most sensitive negotiations. Victoria leaned forward. Raymond Holmes is using her to sabotage the deal. I have proof of their communications. George's composure slipped momentarily. Holmes? He's supposed to be handling the mother. Apparently, he's multitasking. Victoria passed him a surveillance photo of Zoe meeting with Holmes in New York. We need to neutralize this threat immediately. What do you suggest? I've arranged for Sharon Sullivan to be transferred to a private facility upstate for specialized treatment. Officially, she'll be inaccessible. Communication restricted. And the daughter? Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. I'll handle her personally tonight. Lucas Sullivan stared out at Beijing's illuminated skyline, city lights blurred by rain streaking the windows. Behind him, the suite's dining table was covered with contract drafts and market projections. Something's wrong with these production capacity figures, he muttered, more to himself than to Zoe, who sat translating technical specifications across the table. They don't match the facility capabilities we toured. Zoe glanced up, dark circles beneath her eyes betraying her exhaustion. Which section? Semiconductor yields. Page 47. He pushed the document toward her. The Mandarin version shows higher production capacity than our English draft. She examined both versions, frowning. You're right. There's a decimal discrepancy that changes the projection significantly. An honest translation error? No, she said slowly. This is deliberate. The difference is too precise, the contextual phrasing too careful. Lucas watched her expression, calculating. Is Ling Long trying to oversell their capabilities? Zoe hesitated, torn between truth and the growing web of allegiances. Maybe. Or someone is manipulating both sides, Lucas finished, creating gaps that would cause the deal to collapse once implemented. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Victoria thinks you're working with Raymond Holmes to sabotage the negotiations, Lucas said quietly. Zoe's pulse quickened. And what do you think? I think nothing in this situation is as simple as it appears. He moved closer, lowering his voice. George received a call during our meeting break. He thought I'd left, but I overheard him mention your mother's transfer to a private facility. Horror flooded her. What? When? Today. Something about specialized treatment protocols. That's not possible. I authorize all transfers unless the realization hit like a physical blow. Holmes. He's moving her somewhere isolated. Lucas studied her reaction. Why would Holmes transfer your mother without authorization? Zoe made a split-second decision. Because he's been using her medical treatment to blackmail me for information about Sullivan Industries. Something dangerous flashed in Lucas's eyes. Blackmail? For how long? Since before you hired me. He threatened to discontinue her experimental medications if I didn't report on your negotiations. So Victoria was right. His expression hardened. Not entirely. I've been feeding Holmes minimal information. Nothing that would truly compromise the deal. Zoe leaned forward. Lucas, I need to contact my mother immediately. If Holmes has moved her. She's not answering her phone, came Derek's voice as the video call on Zoe's laptop suddenly connected. His face appeared, tight with urgency. 2 men claiming to be specialist physicians transferred her this morning. The hospital had authorization paperwork with your forged signature. Lucas stared at the screen. Derek, you're involved in this. Hello, brother. Yes, I'm involved in unraveling 20 years of Sullivan family secrets. Derek's attention returned to Zoe. I'm trying to trace the transport, but they've covered their tracks professionally. We need to find her, Zoe said, panic rising. If Holmes is isolating her, it means he's escalating his plans. Lucas held up a hand. Slow down, both of you. Why is my brother helping investigate a situation he shouldn't know anything about? Because Sharon Sullivan was framed by our father, Derek replied bluntly. And the same people who orchestrated that fraud are manipulating the Ling Long deal. Lucas's face drained of color. That's a serious accusation. With serious evidence. Derek held up documents. I've been investigating since Zoe arrived at Sullivan Industries. The patterns are undeniable. You've been investigating our company behind my back. I've been searching for the truth about our family's legacy, Derek corrected. Now, Sharon Sullivan's life may depend on how quickly we act. Lucas turned to Zoe, his expression unreadable. How much haven't you told me? Before she could answer, a hotel security alert chimed on her phone. Unauthorized access attempt. Room 2714. Someone's trying to enter my room, Zoe whispered. The adjoining door to the suite burst open, revealing Victoria, her face contorted with triumph. I've been listening to every word, she announced, holding up her phone. And I've recorded this entire conversation. Behind her stood George Lawson, his expression cold as winter. We have a problem to solve, he said simply. Your theatrics are unnecessary, Victoria, Lucas said, his voice dangerously calm as he moved to stand between Zoe and the newcomers. Put the phone away. Theatrics? Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrow raised. I just recorded your precious interpreter confessing to corporate espionage. She's been feeding information to our biggest competitor. Under duress, Lucas corrected, which is a significant distinction. George Lawson stepped forward, his thin face expressionless. Regardless of motivation, Ms. Sullivan has compromised the negotiations. This requires immediate action. On the laptop screen, Derek's voice cut through the tension. George, where's Sharon Sullivan? George glanced dismissively at the screen. Derek, always chasing conspiracy theories. Sharon Sullivan is receiving specialized care away from those who might use her condition as leverage. You mean away from witnesses? Derek countered. I've already alerted my contacts at the FBI about suspicious patient transfers across state lines. George's composure flickered momentarily. An unfortunate waste of federal resources. Lucas surveyed the room, Victoria radiating vindictive triumph, George maintaining his mask of corporate rectitude, Zoe pale but defiant, Derek watching intently from the screen. The power dynamics shifted with each passing second. Everyone, calm down, he ordered. Victoria, George, I need a moment with Zoe privately. Absolutely not, Victoria snapped. She'll manipulate you. It's what she's been doing since day one. Lucas's expression hardened. That wasn't a request. A silent battle of wills played out before Victoria finally relented. Fine. 5 minutes. Then we call hotel security and the authorities. After they reluctantly withdrew, Lucas closed the door and turned to Zoe. Tell me everything. Now. Zoe glanced at Derek on the screen, who nodded encouragement. Holmes approached me 3 months ago. His clinic provides the experimental treatment keeping my mother alive. He discovered my linguistic abilities through his cousin who works at Golden Table and began pressuring me for information about any high-profile clients. So your employment at the restaurant wasn't coincidental. I've worked there for 2 years. Zoe ran a hand through her hair. When you offered me the interpreter position, Holmes escalated his demands. Inside information on the long negotiations in exchange for continuing my mother's treatment. And you agreed. I had no choice, she said quietly. But I've been feeding him useless information. Nothing that would actually compromise the deal. While investigating your mother's connection to Sullivan Industries, Lucas added, glancing at his brother on screen. Derek interjected, Lucas, I've found documentation proving Sharon Sullivan was framed for the embezzlement. Dad and George falsified evidence, then used her as a scapegoat when federal investigators started asking questions. That's a serious allegation against our father's legacy. Our father's legacy is built on laundered money and fraud, Derek countered. And George has continued the operation through carefully structured international deals, just like this one. Lucas turned back to Zoe. And your father? Where does Yulan Fong fit into this narrative? Shock registered on her face. How did you? I make it my business to know everything about potential threats, he said simply. Mr. Ling's unusual interest in you prompted my own investigation. Facial recognition software confirmed my suspicions despite his efforts to obscure his features. Zoe's mind raced. If you knew, why didn't you confront me? I needed to understand your motivations. His expression softened slightly, and, contrary to what Victoria believes, I'm capable of seeing nuance in complex situations. Derek's voice cut through their exchange. We can discuss trust issues later. Right now, we need to find Sharon before Holmes or George can use her as leverage. I'll handle Holmes, Lucas stated. He's operated his medical extortion scheme under the radar for too long. One call to the right authorities, no, Zoe interrupted. Not until my mother is safe. If Holmes is arrested, his clinic staff might terminate her treatment protocols. Lucas considered this. Then we need to locate and secure her first. I've been tracking the transport vehicle, Derek said. It headed north from Manhattan, but then disappeared from traffic cameras. I'm working on accessing private security feeds along possible routes. I have contacts at the embassy who can expedite our return to New York, Lucas offered. Zoe shook her head. We can't leave in the middle of negotiations without raising alarms, and Victoria and George are watching my every move now. Victoria is easy to manage, Lucas said dismissively. George is the concern. No, Derek interjected. Victoria isn't just your jealous fiancé. Her father was partners with Dad and George in the original money laundering scheme. She's protecting the same interests. Lucas absorbed this information, his expression darkening. I need proof. Derek, check her tablet, Lucas instructed. She keeps files on everything. It's how she maintains leverage in her business dealings. A knock at the door interrupted them. Time's up, Victoria called. Security is on their way. Lucas straightened his tie. I'll handle this. Derek, keep searching. Zoe, say nothing further without my presence. He opened the door to find Victoria and George waiting with 2 hotel security officers. There's been a misunderstanding, Lucas announced smoothly. Ms. Sullivan has been working under my direct authorization to identify information leaks within our organization. The operation is sensitive and ongoing. Victoria's smug expression faltered. That's not, as CEO of Sullivan Industries, Lucas continued, addressing the security officers, I take full responsibility for any confusion. There's no need for your services. After the confused officers departed, Victoria rounded on Lucas. What game are you playing? She admitted to working with Holmes. Under duress, as part of an investigation I've been monitoring, Lucas lied effortlessly. Did you really think I'd allow an unknown interpreter access to our most sensitive negotiations without thorough vetting? George's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You never mentioned this operation to me. Compartmentalization was necessary. Given the nature of the leak, Lucas met his gaze steadily. I needed to determine who was vulnerable to external pressure. Victoria wasn't convinced. This is absurd. What about her connections to Sharon Sullivan? The woman who embezzled millions from your father's company. A relationship I was well aware of from the beginning, Lucas countered. Part of why Miss Sullivan was the perfect candidate for this operation. The standoff continued until George's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowning. We have a situation at the office. The contract drafts show critical discrepancies. The ones we discovered earlier, Zoe confirmed, following Lucas's lead. Part of the pattern of sabotage I've been tracking. George studied her with cold calculation. Perhaps we should continue this discussion at Ling Long headquarters, where we can address these discrepancies directly. Agreed, Lucas said. Victoria, your presence at the legal review would be valuable. It was a transparent attempt to separate Victoria from Zoe, but pride made it impossible for Victoria to refuse the acknowledgement of her expertise. Fine, but this isn't finished, she warned Zoe. As they prepared to leave, Zoe's phone buzzed with a message. She angled it away from Victoria's prying eyes to read the text from an unknown number. Temple of Heaven, East Pavilion, 1 hour. Come alone. Her father, summoning her while her mother's life hung in the balance half a world away. I need to collect the translation references from my room, she announced. I'll accompany you, Victoria volunteered immediately. Actually, Lucas interjected, I need your insights on the legal language before we arrive. George can escort Ms. Sullivan. When Victoria reluctantly left with Lucas, George turned to Zoe with Gebhardt, Paul. The waitress who spoke secrets, a corporate conspiracy unraveled.